eggs, chicken, shrimp, boobs, myself. These are all things that I can't look at in the same way since watching this movie. I don't think I've been delighted, disgusted, and so very challenged all in the span of one movie-going sitting like I was with this film. Hi, my name is Emily, or La Movie Mija. I'm a part-time filmmaker, full-time movie lover, and this is my review of The Substance. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for checking out my video. I hope you consider liking and subscribing to my channel so you can get more movie reviews from me. I post one movie review a week, and sometimes I'll even take you to the movies with me. But if you want more movie and TV related, sometimes personal kind of content from me, you can find me on social media like TikTok and Instagram. But enough about me. That's not why we're here. I know why you're here, little freak. Let's talk about The Substance. Elisabeth Sparkle, renowned for an aerobics show, faces a devastating blow on her 50th birthday as her boss fires her. Amid her distress, a laboratory offers her a substance which promises to transform her into an enhanced version of herself. Directed by Coralie, starring Demi, Margaret, Qualley, and Dennis Quaid. I have to admit, unlike other movies that I've reviewed on this channel, this movie was out for quite some time before I made it out to the theater to see it. So I was not familiar with Coralie work. I hadn't seen any of her other films, but I did see some memes about this movie. I had some kind of like language about what they were going to be talking about, and I'd also already heard some of the buzz that they were considering submitting this film for Best Musical or Comedy for the Oscars. So I was like, maybe this movie is also funny? All that to say, I had some more context about this film than I typically have, but truly nothing can prepare you for what this movie is. I was prepared for the gore. I was prepared for the body horror of it all, but I was not prepared for the comedy and the satire. It is very overt, very visual, very blatant, not only in its visual medium and the way that it presents its characters, from the costume design to the production design, but it's very overt in its callbacks. Like, as it's telling the story, the camera will point to different things to make it so obvious and so clear what you're supposed to take in that scene. All the information is very direct and in your face, and it makes for a very jarring experience overall. She employs the use of fisheye lens for that very poignant shrimp scene I'm thinking about. The reason I can't look at shrimp the same way, if you know, you know. From its costume designs, the very striking and poppy colors, to the brat green of the substance itself, everything is very poppy and in your face, and in direct contrast to the dark and gruesome gore that we later experience in this movie. As original and individualistic as the visuals are in this film, they are paying plenty of homage to horror iconography. From The Shining to Reanimator, Psycho, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Carrie, Alien, The Thing, and those are just the things that I wrote down after leaving the theater. Like, I haven't even dug deeper to see what else I could have missed. Those are just the ones that were like, oh yes girl, I see what you're doing. I did seek out the script for this film because they did kind of tout their success at the Cannes Film Festival at the very beginning of the film with their little laurel saying that this film won Best Screenplay, and I was like, I want to see what that looks like. And I think the script itself is about 150 pages, and only 20 or so of those pages have actual dialogue. And that explains a lot of the experience watching this movie, because the dialogue is very sparse. There is not a lot that you learn about these characters, and I don't think the point of this film is like a character examination. I think a lot of this film is successful because it is relying on its audience to project the experience that they have with these types of themes that are being explored onto these very blank and sparse characters. And as a horror film, I think that's very effective, because horror, again, is always more effective when we get to assert our own fears and our own worries and the things that we are affected by within society onto the characters we see on the screen. It works very well in line with the horror of the scenario in which our characters find themselves. And to that end, the body horror is very extreme. Not up to the level of Titan. I think that's my metric of like the most excruciating body horror film I've ever experienced. Like, what are these French directors on? Note to self, watch more French cinema. I do have some thoughts on how the body horror plays into the overall themes and the message of the film. However, I'm going to save that for the spoiler discussion. We've already talked a little bit about the visuals, but I will say that there is a lot of attention to the sound design as well. And as someone who is very in tune to the sound designs of film, I felt like that really elevated the horror and the discomfort of watching this film. So thank you, I think. This film is also very overt, very over the top, very in your face, very direct. Like, they are not taking any chances with you not understanding the point of a scene or missing any kind of information. You don't have to go digging for clues anywhere. There is not a lot of mind work that you have to actually do watching this movie. It's all just coming at you. Although this movie is intended to be very overt, very in your face, very direct, everything is very definitive. However, I do think that that was one of my critiques of this film, is that at some point the satire that was being communicated became very repetitive. It was very constant, and towards the middle third of the film it kind of started to drag, save for some of the more emotionally charged scenes that were really reliant on the performance of Demi Moore. Demi Moore in this film was astounding. I think one of the reasons I gravitate to horror films is because it is a place for women to just, you know, Demi Moore took this opportunity. She ate and left no crumbs. Demi Moore is an actress who's been in the public eye for like most of my life, like from Ghost to Charlie's Angels Full Throttle. Like, she has been a constant in the public eye, and I remember the backlash that she received for dating a younger man, Ashton Kutcher at the time. Publicly, older women aren't allowed to exist in Hollywood or in major movie productions or in lead roles like this. And when I say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I mean that in that if Demi Moore as the Elisabeth Sparkle in this film is struggling with any kind of beauty insecurities, I mean, she's drop dead gorgeous. And if someone thinks that I am gorgeous or pretty, and I'm going to tell this to my friends too, if someone gives you any kind of compliment, who are you to dismiss what they're saying? Because Elisabeth Sparkle, I swear, if she had one friend, this be a different movie. And then we have the final act, which is over the top. Everyone's talking about it. So if you haven't seen it, just know that it is something that is going to, whatever it takes. By the time you get to the ending, you're kind of like, yeah, I can see how we got here. It makes total sense for how we got there. I don't think it was too beyond the realm of the reality within the scope of this film. I did find it very hilarious personally. I don't know what that says about me. Please don't judge me too harshly. But I did struggle with it because I felt like it started to muddy the feminist themes of the film. Overall, this film is spectacular and messy and challenging. I did find that I asserted a lot of my own personal experience onto the film. There is one particular moment in the film that resonated with me beyond all belief. And I found it interesting how the film oscillates between that tragedy and the comedy and the horror of being a woman. It's definitely a film that no man could have written, not to this extent. And to that end, I am just so freaking excited for this new era of like female directors exploring body horror and what that means within the context of pressure and the societal expectations of womanhood. From Rose Glass's Love Lies Bleeding to this film, there are so many iterations of a woman's body being explored as outside of the realm of the male gaze, outside of societal beauty standards, and what it means to be in conflict with your own body as a woman. Whew, okay, like if you haven't seen this movie, hopefully I convince you to give it a try because I do think it is worth your time. By the time this review comes out, it'll be streaming on Mubi, so you can watch the movie now and then come back and watch these spoilers later. But for all you cool cats who've already seen this film, let's talk about some spoilers. Like I've been alluding to throughout this video, there were some very challenging aspects for me watching this movie. And no, it wasn't the body horror. I didn't find the body horror to be all that like beyond gruesome. Of course, it was disturbing, it was uncomfortable, but it wasn't going to drive me out of the theater. For me, what I felt most challenging about this movie, the challenging parts of this movie were the way that we are integrating like the hagsploitation film where you have the reliance on the body of an older woman, a woman who has wrinkles, who has liver spots, a woman who has gray hair and is becoming feeble. Like that image as horror and presenting an older woman as a monster within the context of an overtly feminist body horror film felt very cruel. And I think to that end, when we got very repetitive with the male gaze camera exploits of the film, the parts where we are just like staring up the back of Margaret Qualley over and over and over again. Yes, I understand that's part of the exhaustion of being a woman, is the idea that your body is constantly under criticism. It's constantly being gazed upon. It's constantly being objectified. However, once we're in like the middle parts of the film where that just starts to become repetitive, I felt like it really cut down on the pacing of the film. And at that point, I started asking myself, would this film been more effective as a short? Because I felt like thematically we got to all the places we needed to go by the middle of the movie. Beyond that, there was not a lot of growth for the characters. There was not a lot of space for the narrative to go beyond what we're already tackling in the first third of the film. The point of this movie is not the character exploration. It's not the point to find out who Elisabeth is beyond like what she's experiencing in this moment. And of course, it's not the point to find out who Sue is beyond this experience, because Sue is just like an amalgamation of pretty girl standards. Sue doesn't even have a multisyllabic name. She's very simple. She's very straightforward. It doesn't matter to the plot or to us if she has a last name, where she comes from, what her social security number is, like how's she going to get paid. Those are details that do not matter for the story. But what does matter to the story is that we are building to this emotional corporal catharsis about our realization and our own association with how we treat our bodies. And as a woman in my 30s, I feel like I have experienced a lot of what's going on in this movie, and it was very shocking to know that I resonated so much with the woman who is celebrating her 50th birthday within this film. Demi Moore, I believe, is older than that, which could have fooled me. My God, that woman is gorgeous. Which, side note, I believe that it was great for them to cast a stereotypically beautiful woman in this role. I think some criticisms were trying to allude to the fact that maybe it would have been more effective if she wasn't so stereotypically beautiful, but I think because she's already stereotypically beautiful, it makes the conceit of her trying to become even more gorgeous and even more stunning than she already is just outrageous. And that's the whole point of this movie, is just how outrageous it is that women have to operate within these societal standards. In stark contrast to how gross and disgusting and the men get to be. Dennis Quaid's character, it doesn't matter that he is just rudely slopping up shrimp. It doesn't matter that his teeth are in some sort of decay, like he's not flossing properly. It doesn't matter that the men are bald and like none of them are there for their looks. Them getting older, they get to experience life very differently from Elisabeth Sparkle. Then again, Elisabeth Sparkle is a woman who has benefited from perpetuating the ideals of the beauty standards. So she is a victim of being in a self-made trap. She has built a life that has been afforded to her by her beauty. And so when she no longer is able to center her beauty as her main value add to society, she is at a loss for what to do with herself. Even with all of this fame and power that she has, she can't operate within society like she did the day before her 50th birthday, the day before she was let go from her job, which is to help perpetuate the idea that other women should be and can be beautiful just by following her very non-certifiable workout mechanics. And that just adds to the absurdity. When you think about it, Elisabeth Sparkle has her younger self, Sue, operating within the world 7 days at a time, and she can do anything, right? Like she can pursue whatever life she wants. But what does she decide to do? She decides to just live the same life she already had. She decides to audition for the role of replacing her older self. How twisted is that? That Elisabeth Sparkle couldn't imagine a world outside of the one she'd already lived. She doesn't know how to not be hot and beautiful within the context of the world that will benefit from her being hot and beautiful. It's twisted. And it makes the case that sometimes women are complicit in our own misogyny. Like, we help to uphold the patriarchy as long as we are able to benefit from it. And that is a realization, and that is something that's really hard that I wrestle with personally. Do I dare record a video without putting a little bit of lipstick on or without pushing my hair back? I am still susceptible to the standards that society has for women. Anytime that I do decide to go outside of those standards, it is a concentrated effort. It is a choice. It is something that feels like I'm going against the grain. And to that end, we can even read into the discourse happening between cis-het women and trans women and the confines of femininity, the idea of passing, and how women, all kinds of women, are subjected to the same types of ideals that influence the way that you are viewed in the world and valued by the people around you. I find the substance itself and the way that it's presented to be very timely and timeless and hilarious. Elisabeth Sparkle gets no instructions or very little instructions on how to use this thing. She doesn't have any warning labels. There's no FDA approval. There's nothing that she is seeking out in order to make sure it's safe for her to partake. I feel like women are constantly in the throes of chemical harm or just these ridiculous things that we subject ourselves to. And I am more on the fragile end of that. I don't even get my eyebrows waxed because when I was getting ready for my quinceañera, I got my eyebrows waxed and she took off a chunk of my skin with that eyebrow. I've never been back. You can make the case that the substance is a stand-in for Ozempic, but I think it could be a stand-in for anything from the last 50 or so years that women subject themselves to in the name of beauty. Beauty is pain. But even when her own beauty is at risk, because Elisabeth Sparkle, again, is beautiful. She is stunning. Because she is of a certain age, she doesn't see her own life worth living when she is Elisabeth Sparkle in those 7 days. When Sue has her off days and she's being back to Elisabeth Sparkle, she doesn't have any value in herself as an older woman. And that's the tragedy of this movie. Women have an expiration date for existing in society. They certainly do in Hollywood. I mean, just look at Jennifer Lawrence in The Silver Linings Playbook. She's how old in that movie? You can also read The Substance as a 2024 feminist horror version of The Portrait of Dorian Gray. And that's most evident when you have those two portraits of Elisabeth and Sue. So Elisabeth has her portrait that she probably had commissioned to be made, a portrait that she sought out for herself. And it looks like she's closer to the age that she is when we meet her in that portrait in her apartment. In contrast, you have Sue on a billboard. Sue couldn't put herself on a billboard. Sue is being put up on a billboard by her popularity, by the network, by the people that love her and embrace her. And that just doubles down on the idea that women of a certain age with the cachet of beauty and likability will be embraced by society enough to be put up on a billboard. And I love that those two images are staring at each other through Elisabeth's apartment. And Elisabeth, when she has barely any energy left, makes it a point to put her portrait back out in her apartment. Yes, queen, you do that. Some other quick things I want to talk about. The food, it has a very clear presence in this movie. It serves as a vehicle for some of that grotesqueness earlier on with Dennis Quaid, again with the shrimp. And then you have Elisabeth Sparkle cooking from this French cookbook, all of this very rich and fattening foods. As much as we are seeing the physical ramifications of Sue abusing the 7-day trial period with the rapid aging of Elisabeth, we also see that one point that Sue is affected by Elisabeth's choices in her 7 days with that chicken bone almost coming out of her butt. Outside of a horror film, food is something that is comforting, it's nourishment, it's something that is necessary for life. But in the context of this film, Food is another way for people to abuse their bodies and their power. They're definitely all very rich and well off, so it's not something that's seen as sustenance. It's just seen as something that you can indulge in. For me, this movie very much felt like a cautionary tale. I think women risk their lives every day for beauty. Whether you're getting your nails done, you're getting a wax, you're getting your eyelashes done. I mean, have you had your eyelashes done? If you haven't had your eyelashes done, it is a very surreal experience. They have to like tape your eyes closed, and like you just have to lie there while someone is like very finely applying the lashes to your lash line. We got plastic surgery, Botox, we got fillers, we have people finding means to escape the high costs of some of these risky procedures and putting themselves in dangerous scenarios. And of course, none of that comes at any surprise because this movie is very explicit in the message that it's trying to give, and I believe that's part of what is trying to be communicated. However, I don't see that being as well presented within the storytelling of the 7-day switches between Elisabeth and Sue, because the horror is coming from Elisabeth getting older due to Sue exploiting the 7-day rule, which for that guy, she exploited that rule just to have a night with that guy. Not worth it. Get to the ending of the film, and that's where it gets a little ridiculous. But when you see Monstro Eliza Sue, she is no longer bothered by anything. In contrast to Elisabeth having a breakdown, trying to go out on a date, not getting her lips just right, and like smearing it across her face, which I did a little cosplay for Halloween. You can see it here. You then have Monstro Eliza Sue being completely unbothered in this new form, putting on her dress, putting her earrings on. The scene that kind of killed me and made me kick my feet in the best way was her curling her singular hair only to find out that it burned off. And there's like a little tinge of disappointment as she realizes it. She's been through enough. Monstro Eliza Sue is going to press on, and press on she does. She gets all the way back to the studio, and there are boobs everywhere. Boobs, very French. And with the taped Elisabeth picture with the red lipstick exaggerated on her new form, nobody is like immediately calling out that this is clearly not Sue. This is not Elisabeth or Sue. This is something else entirely. Nobody calls that out because women aren't seen as people. They are seen as objects. And here we have this conglomeration of objects, and she just starts spewing the blood everywhere, covering them all and the audience, metaphorically, of course, with the consequences of our own actions. But that final scene that mimics the beginning, that top-down view of her star on the Walk of Fame, the part that really drives home that idea that our bodies are a space for horror because of the choices that we enact on ourselves in relation to the societal pressures we have as women. Just Elisabeth's face now just completely melts into her star, and she is smiling. She has been freed from her corporal prison and now no longer has to deal with the pressures of presenting a certain way because she is not of a body. And that is the true tragedy of our experience here on this earth, is that we will not be free of our bodies. We have to find other ways to cope. And watching this movie is one real harrowing way to do that. Whew, okay, that was a lot. This movie is a lot. So makes sense that this video that talks about this movie would be a lot. There's just so much to say. I feel like there's a lot to celebrate about this film. I did struggle with the way that some of the things were presented, but overall I do think that it is opening the door for more explorations, body horror, feminist horror films, movies made by women, all of it. I am here for it. And as horrific and tragic as it is to be confronted with the message of this film, I think it's an important conversation that we have with ourselves and with each other and society as a whole. Things need to change, and they won't change if we don't talk about them, and Hollywood is a prime place to start talking about it. But that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching my video. I'll catch you next time. Bye!